Now, if you're setting up a home gym for calisthenics, it can be a little bit tricky, especially when you're working towards a budget. So today I'm going to go through some different options depending on what type of money you have to spend, but also what your goals are, what your training space is like, and I'm going to help you make the right decisions in terms of what you buy. Number one, let's look at a zero budget. So a zero budget just means that you need to work with what you have around you. Everyone can find a wall, everyone can find floor, and with only those two things you can learn to handstand. So you can do all your handstand drills here, you can work all your way up to a freestanding handstand. Potentially you could take that all the way to a one-arm handstand. You could work your press handstands up against the wall. You could work your handstand push-ups so eventually starting to work away from the wall for those handstand push-up variations. And the press handstand. Now, going for the handstand push-up and the press is much easier if you have boxes, ledges or steps, but so you might be able to find those things around you. You can work all your flexibility skills. So we can work all the handstand balance from that wall handstand or easy arm balances all the way through to a one-arm handstand. We can do pushing strength from push-ups through to handstand push-ups. Using the wall, then eventually a freestanding handstand push-up. You can do the press handstand variations, all the mobility. Planche work obviously doesn't need anything. We can just do that on the floor. So the pros are the cost. There isn't any, so that's really cool. And then you can take it with you. Transportation, you're not taking anything with you, meaning you can train anywhere. Now for cons, it's the lack of pulling. So you need to be very creative when it comes to some movements. Some things you're going to have to go out and about to find. So if you want to do any hanging or pulling movements, you're going to have to go to playgrounds, parks, or find the furniture around the house that you can hang off of. So let's move up to the next level. So say you've got under $50 to spend. And this is where we need to start to make some choices because we've got money to spend, but we can only probably buy one thing or two very cheap things. So I'll be looking at three different things. I'll be looking at a bar or steps or P-bars. Now, if your home setup allows it and your budget can make it work, I would be finding a bar. Now this bar was from Bunnings, which is a hardware store in Australia. It's galvanized pipe and I've gone through and I've attached to the rafters. Now I could do that because I own the house and my setup allows it, but you could go to something like a doorway pull-up bar. They can have their limitations, but you can do majority of your pulling work. So you'll be able to do all the chin-ups, the pull-ups, the hanging for mobility, front lever variations, skin the cats and things like that. If you can't make the bar work, I'd go for boxes. So these are around $10 each, or some P-bars. Now with the P-bars, you're probably looking for lower ones at that budget, or material wise, you could make your own. So you can go into things like L-sit variations. You can go through to shoulder stands, mobility, press handstand drills, and planche variations. So if you did go for the bar, I'd open up all those hanging variations, the chin-ups, the pull-ups, the levers, L-sit and shoulder stand and that on the P-bars, the boxes, shoulder stands, handstand push-up exercises. You could use it for your partial range handstand presses and things. And remember, with each one we move down on this list, you can also do all the ones above it. So then you can do all of these plus all of those. So pros, the cost is still nice and low. Plus we have more options now, especially if we go down the bar route, you're going to open up some pulling. And then the cons, you're still going to be lacking some things because you have to make a choice. You're not going to be able to buy all of those. You're going to have to limit it to one or two items. Now let's move up to the $100 budget. Now with the $100 budget, you could obviously have multiples of these and just make them all up to spend the $100. Or you could invest in something a little bit bigger like this. We could go to rings and you could probably find some tall P-bars for that as well. Now obviously the prices that you can get all these things for is going to vary a lot. I bought this for $50 off Facebook Marketplace. It has the extra bars and goes all the way up this sort of height. It's not the stablest things, but you can do muscle ups on it. I'm actually a big fan of this, especially when it's set on the lower height, because you can do things like front levers really comfortably because I can step into that position. And then I can do bar muscle ups, pull overs, skin the cats, and all the row variations. However, if you have somewhere to hang them or you can do it in the budget, I would always recommend going with rings. The number of different exercises, progressions, and skills you can do on the rings from total beginner level all the way to super advanced is amazing. But a lot of people will buy these, they stick them in the bag, they've got nowhere to hang them, and they think they're going to use them and they just stay in the bag. But if you are going to use them, you could get away with only having a pair of rings and they would give you so many different options for your calisthenics. So if you are someone that's not going to hang them, don't buy these. Instead, I'd buy these bars or something like this. You can still do the rows and all the pulling variations on these. You can do front levers. So So they're a great option, especially for the cost. You just can't do chin-ups and pull-ups that well on them. So the price can still be cost because it's very reasonable at under $100. We're getting more and more options now. However, we're still having to make choices because we can't have everything. And to keep it around that $100, you might have to go down a second-hand route or be quite selective on what you buy. Now, when it comes to the $250 one, I'll be looking at the same choices, but I would be looking at having multiple things. So instead of choosing between them, I would have all three of those. And that way, you're just gonna have lots of exercise options. So I can start out with easier variations on the fixed bars, or I can move them into the lounge when I want to work on my front lever work. And then I can work harder and harder progressions until I get up to the harder movements when you're ready for them. Now we'll finish the pros and cons at the end when we start to get to the more expensive ones, but when we start doubling the money again and get to around $500, you can either just go for a nicer version of that setup. We can start looking at these floor mats. Again, you can pick these up secondhand. These are the 15mm 1 meter square mats, and I put them down on my garage floor and they work well, especially if you're going to use barbells and bumpers as well. We're also going to be able to start looking at other options, a little bit more expensive setups in terms of a squat rack, but it will reduce these other things because that's going to take a lot of your budget. Now, I'm a big fan of these portable squat racks as opposed to the big cage variations. The cage variations are really good if you want to put rings on them and really kip around and move around all over the place. But I've got no weights on this at the moment, look, and I'm struggling to pull on it. You can definitely do muscle ups on these. I can't do it in the garage because of the roof clearance, but if you had a higher ceiling, these work really well. And especially if you put weights on them, they're super stable. Obviously, you can use it with all your barbell exercises as well. And if I didn't have that separate bar for rings, I'd be hanging my rings on here. I'd just put this bar all the way up to the top height. If you notice something here, we've been adding more equipment, but we haven't been adding more exercises. This doesn't really open up a lot more exercises. It just makes it easier in terms of the setup and your options on how you do the exercises. If you don't really need the squat rack, I'd miss that off at the moment, and instead I'd get one of the wooden boxes, as these are so good, especially if you're into the handstand variations. So the presses, the handstand push-ups, you can use them for flexibility, for this type of movements, your partial range press handstand. And I use them a lot in my training. This one's actually from outside, and you can see all the sand and rubbish on the bottom of it, because I take it out the back and train there. So even at this $500 level, you're having to make some choices. If you start to buy more of the expensive things, that's going to limit you on the other smaller things. Now, some of those smaller things are probably better for certain calisthenic skills, but if you want to double it up for some weight training as well, a squat rack is obviously great. Now, if you have a much bigger budget, I'd be looking at all of the above, so getting everything there that we've covered, because I reckon these are the necessity. These are the things that you really need to get well-balanced calisthenic skills. But I'd also be adding things like barbells, bumpers, different bar setups. So low bars, medium bars, high bars. You could be looking at things like handstand canes if you're into that style of training, saunas, ice baths, and all the cool stuff. But obviously that has to fit your space as well. I personally think the sweet spot is around the $500, where the cost is still quite cheap. You have lots of options that you can do, but you are still gonna have to make some choices. This direction, the choices are gonna be more limited. But the cool thing about calisthenics is we still have lots and lots of options, even at this one. The cons with this one is normally the space. So you can end up with too much equipment in a small space. And interestingly, the people sometimes in this part don't get the results like the people in this part. So don't be limited by your budget. If you have any questions, or if you'd like me to make some suggestions on your personal situation, stick it down in the comments below. Check out my app and website if you're interested in coaching, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Thanks, guys.